On Markets Unusual this week, we look at how the global trade in agricultural commodities has become a geopolitical tool. And as Gary Alfonso explains, the principle of price discovery sits at the center of this global battle between countries in the G7 and the Brics political formations. Over to you, Gary.
So this week, with President Cyril Ramaphosa and many other presidents from developing countries around the world in China to talk about greater trade relationships and also greater geopolitical cooperation, I thought it'd be pertinent to talk about price discovery. And you think, has this guy gone mad? What has price discovery got to do with a massive geopolitical gathering of political leaders in China? Well, it has everything to do with what is happening globally from a geopolitical perspective, and also from the way in which global trades are taking place and how currencies and financial systems around the world are being affected by the growing of these two economic blocks in the world. We're talking about Brics and we're talking about the G7. And almost every single transaction that we do, whether it's within Brics or in the G7, has something to do with price discovery, because price discovery is the price and the fair price agreed between buyers and sellers globally, and how exactly trades take place and the price at which it takes place. And these geopolitical formations are starting to affect the data and information available. Before we get to that, let's perhaps quickly look at how the G7 and the Brics formations have started changing and have started globally affecting the way in which trades and also the financial information about trading has become available. So in blue, the G7 countries, and primarily Europe and also Japan there in the Far East. Brics countries. The important thing to understand about Brics is that even though Brics stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa, there are 159 countries around the world that are starting to make approaches to Brics, that they want to form part of this global geopolitical or global trade bloc. And what that happens with some of the latest countries like Saudi Arabia and now also Turkey, most recently Argentina, countries allowed in as almost quasi-members of Brics. What started to happen is that as these trades are starting to happen between countries in South Africa, Russia, Brazil, India, much of the information about those transactions are no longer available to the central repositories of global trade. And to perhaps explain, from a G7 and Brics perspective, what is happening from a GDP purchasing power parity. And this is the forecast up to 2028. An international World Bank survey shows that G7 countries are expected to decline their GDPs to just below combined 30%, and the Brics countries are scheduled, even current Brics countries, and not even factoring in new countries coming in, new developing countries, growing to above that, and has already started passing around about 2021, 22, the number of trades in those markets, or the GDP purchasing power parity. Then to try and understand, let's get back to price discovery. Price discovery is simple. It is actually just the agreed price between buyers and sellers globally. And if you look at the graph of, and again, once again, very simple, it's demand and supply. And at some point where it crosses, this is where generally you find fair price discovery in global markets. So if you were in Brazil and somebody in China wanted to buy your avocados previously, what they had to do was to go through the Chicago Mercantile Exchange and buy it in US dollar. What's happening now with the Brics formation is that countries are starting to trade in currencies other than the US dollar. And what's happening then is the fact that ultimately, as they're trading outside of the US dollar, those SWIFT transactions are no longer taking place, which is the data at the center of price discovery. That is no longer happening, and is happening less and less in the US. And for instance, a market like the Chicago Mercantile Exchange is now having a whole lot of information excluded from Brics countries. So if we finally look at the projected growth of Brics countries and the G7 over the next few decades, the most important thing to understand is that, as one can see from the G7 countries and the countries within the Brics formations, is that the annual growth rates of countries within Brics are by far outstripping the growth rates of the G7 countries. Even Japan, where you can see 0.9% growth, is on parity with South Africa. And this is the 2024 forecast of the World Bank. And so the GDP growth forecast of these countries, Brics is far outweighing it. And the most important current thing happening globally is the fact that the information is no longer available in the core US markets with dollar trades. That means the US market can no longer confidently predict the amount of exports of wheat, grains, etc., from a commodities perspective, and that is causing a little bit of price discovery havoc around the world right now, and it's only set to increase as these geopolitical formations form and become stronger.
That was Business Day TV's Gary Alfonso with Markets Unusual.